Hey, good morning, everybody. I would like to talk today about the European Convention on Human Rights because there's been a lot of discussion about this over the last week, especially, but over the last months as well. Why this has come to the forefront this week is because of the fake conservatives' failed Rwanda migrant deportation scheme, which was always going to be set up to fail. It was never going to work. It was just a PR exercise in order to try to throw a bit of red meat to their voters, who they've largely lost because they're absolutely appalling. And they don't do what they say they're going to do. They say they're going to cut migration. They have said they're going to cut net migration for the last 12 years, and it's just gone bigger and bigger. It's got more and more and more year on year. Now we're seeing not just people coming in on flights in the morning from Romania, coming in illegally on the back of lorries, but you can see hundreds of people coming across the channel every day on dinghies. And we should be doing what other countries do, is having a blockade and pushing them back to France so that they don't come over. But we're going to perhaps have 100,000 people this year coming across the channel on dinghies. There's not enough houses for everybody to live, so they're being put in hotels. That's got massive problems as well for the hotel trade and for taxation, because that will need billions of pounds a year. So immigration has just been a disaster under the fake conservatives. They've been worse than Labour, who obviously openly want mass immigration. The fake conservatives say they don't, but it's higher and worse under them than it was in Labour. So this Rwanda scheme was set up to fail, and of course we know the story. There was going to be a flight with 130 people on it, and the number got whittled down and down and down. And eventually the European Court of Human Rights intervened very, very unusually and very quickly to make a ruling that the UK could not deport any illegal migrant asylum seekers to Rwanda. So the question then comes up, should we leave the European Court of Human Rights, which would also mean leaving the European Convention on Human Rights as well, which was, it came into force in 1950. So I know that I have people who follow me and who support the Heritage Party who've got different opinions on this, and the way it sort of divides up. In general, I've been in politics for a long time. First for Brexit, I was in UKIP back in the day before the referendum. Then I left, and now I'm in the Heritage Party. And I've been very, very active and vocal in the freedom movement, against lockdowns, against coerced and forced vaccinations. So I know there's two groups of people who might be watching this video. So Brexiteers would almost certainly all say, yes, we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and would have said that a long time ago as well. But people in the freedom movement might be a little bit more worried and saying, oh, no, we shouldn't, because this is a plan to undermine our human rights. So you've got two different groups of people and maybe two different feelings about this. So what's the answer? Well, my opinion, you'd have to make up your own opinion on this, but my opinion is it's a bit nuanced. So please bear with me and stay with me for a couple of minutes. I think we should leave the European Court and Convention on Human Rights because I believe in national sovereignty. And we've left the European Union to get rid of their power over us to enforce directives and regulations and rulings from the European Court of Justice, which is different from the European Court of Human Rights. So we've left the European Union. Unfortunately, we've still got problems with Northern Ireland because it wasn't a good deal that Johnson signed, but that's a whole other issue. I won't go into that here. But what's left is we're still in the European Convention of Human Rights, which is not a function of the European Union. It's actually a function of the Council of Europe, which is entirely different to the European Union. It's much bigger. It includes it includes Russia. Well, Russia got thrown out this year, but until this year it included Russia, it includes Turkey. I think it includes Georgia and Azerbaijan and Armenia and lots of other countries that aren't in the EU as well. But clearly, they have made a decision to override our national sovereignty, and because we are in it, there's nothing we can do. Unless we want to break international law and the agreement and the convention, we have to obey their ruling as a country. I don't think this court should have the power to make a ruling like this, to say that if someone has broken the law by coming into the country illegally, economic migrants who are not genuine asylum seekers, come from a safe country like France, they're saying that the UK has no right to control our own borders and to do what we like to implement our own migration policies. And that's why we left the EU for this. And now we've got the European Court of Human Rights stepping into the shoes of the EU and saying you can't do what you want and we're going to take away your national sovereignty or curtail your national sovereignty. Well, that's absolutely wrong. That shouldn't be happening. So we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think if you're a Brexiteer, on that basis, you probably agree with me. And actually, you know, for the Heritage Party, we put a manifesto out at the very beginning when we launched publicly in September 2020. We did a lot of groundwork before then, so I actually wrote the manifesto in April 2020, and we launched a few months later. But from that time, you know, for the last 2 years, we've had that in our manifesto from the very beginning. The European Convention on Human Rights is very good, but we have now 70 years of case law overriding it in contradicting with the original spirit of the convention. And now we have activist lawyers who are pushing their progressive left-wing agendas. Obviously, they're for mass migration, they're against national sovereignty, and they're pushing that agenda you know, in a way that was never envisaged in 1950. So now staying in the European Convention of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights, is detrimental to our national sovereignty because things are happening that were never envisaged at the beginning. Now, as I've always said, the European Convention on Human Rights is very good. And why is it very good? Because it was written by British lawyers based on British law, or English law, if you like. Be technical here, there's English law, there's Scottish law, there's Northern Irish law. Okay, so English law. It's based on English law. And it was written to help a continent that had been ravaged and destroyed by National Socialism and tyranny in the 1940s. They had legal systems, they had laws that had been completely destroyed by the National Socialists as they overtook Europe and put in their tyranny. And they needed help to rebuild their legal systems. So we didn't need a convention on human rights here in the UK. It was written by British lawyers, UK lawyers, to help the countries of Europe who needed to rebuild their societies. So when we have, you know, people in the freedom movement genuinely, from a genuine concern of human rights being eroded, I know that because I've been on the front lines with police acting in a tyrannical manner over the last 2 years. I know there's a genuine concern at the moment that this is going to erode our human rights. You know, if we repeal the Human Rights Act 1998, and if we leave the European Convention on Human Rights 1950, there's a genuine concern that it will affect our human rights and our fundamental freedoms. However, what I would say is our human rights and fundamental freedoms do not derive from those two things. Human rights did not start with the Human Rights Act 1998. Which came in under Tony Blair. And what that did is it said all the judgments in every court in the UK have to be in line with the European Convention on Human Rights and all of the case law that comes from the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. So that's what the Human Rights Act 1998 did. That does not give us our human rights. We had human rights before 1998. And our human rights do not derive from the European Convention on Human Rights of 1950. We had human rights in this country before 1950. They didn't suddenly start in 1950 with the European Convention on Human Rights. They derive from Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights of 1689 and common law and other laws that have been put in place for our freedom, for our liberty down the centuries, like the Toleration Act and so on. So in Magna Carta says there must be trial by jury and due process. You cannot be arbitrarily imprisoned and charged and given a punishment without a jury of your peers trying you by someone who just decides they don't like you, and the sort of thing that happens in a banana republic. And the Bill of Rights says there should be no excessive bail, no excessive fines, no cruel and unusual punishments, and also gives freedom of speech in Parliament. Not for everybody, but that's come later. And actually in the same year you had the Toleration Act, which gave freedom of religious belief. And that was the area at the time where there was the biggest conflict of ideas. I mean, you just had 150 years of Protestants and Catholics killing each other. And the Toleration Act said, well, you can have freedom of religious belief. It doesn't matter, whether you agree with the establishment or you disagree with the establishment. You got the right to say what you want, worship how you want, believe what you want, and you'll no more be harassed or punished by the state for your religious beliefs. So that's where freedom of speech started to come in after 150 terrible years of sort of people killing each other. So that's developed, and of course the common law. The understanding we have from common law is that everything is permissible unless you are causing harm, loss, or damage to another living man or a woman. So you have fundamental freedoms, and the state cannot take those away from you, and the state cannot impinge on them. Now, that's wonderful, because that's the understanding we have in common law in the English-speaking world. That is how the law works, or it should do. Unfortunately, what's happening now is that's starting to be inverted, and we're going into sort of Roman law system more and more without us even realizing that. We believe we're still in a common law system, but more and more they're trying to change it so that instead of everything being permissible unless it's specifically prohibited, the government is now trying to invert that to bring in a system where nothing is permitted unless it's specifically allowed, or you are given specific permission to do something. And this is the system you have on the continent. So there's thousands and thousands of regulations where the government says you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. Because the understanding there is unless the government says you're allowed to do something, then it's illegal. You're not allowed to do it. Which is really terrible system for freedom, because if you want to do something by law, you have to go, is there a regulation or a law that says I'm allowed to say this, or I'm allowed to do this, or I'm allowed to drive here, or I'm allowed to walk there? I mean, what a terrible system to labour under and to struggle under. Common law is much better. You can do anything you want unless the government says for good reason you can't do it because it will cause harm, loss, or damage to another living man or woman. Now that's being turned on its head. Specifically, over the last 2 years, under the sort of emergency legislation they've brought in, which was terrible, should never have been done, because it breaks our social contract, it breaks our common law, it's totally trying to destroy our society and our heritage and the way of doing things in our nation. And in the English-speaking world, that's how we do things. But where was the European Court of Human Rights? over those last 2 years when the government essentially implemented tyranny and broke all of the, well, not all of them, but many of the articles in the convention were broken. I mean, in Scotland, they tried to get rid of trial by jury. In England, there were arbitrary fines given out for just meeting with people or opening your business. Where was the European Court of Right then? Court of Human Rights then to say, this is wrong, and we're going to quickly pass through a judgment like they did under the Rwanda scheme to say, no, you government, you can't take away people's rights like this. Where were they to give an emergency ruling to curtail the power of the government to implement this tyranny? They didn't do it. So, it doesn't work when we actually need it. They didn't do a damn thing over the last 2 years to stop tyranny and to stop them from impinging on our human rights. And what human rights are essentially are curtailments on the power of government so that they are not permitted to do things that would harm our human rights and our fundamental freedoms. So we don't need the European Court of Human Rights to do that, because we have everything in our own law that should provide for our human rights to be respected. Unfortunately, whatever nation you live in, whatever system you live in, if you get people in power who are going to abuse that, then... And whatever system you have, whatever law you have, it can be broken and it can be abused. And that's what we've seen over the last 2 years. So you can have the best system in the world, the best constitution in the world. But if you have people in power that are just not going to respect your constitution or your laws, then the only thing you can do really is to get rid of those people and put people in place that are going to respect your human rights and your fundamental freedoms. Having this higher body hasn't helped us when we really needed it. So I'm not afraid of coming out of the European Convention on Human Rights. I think it's something that we do need to do for the situation of migration, which is a big problem for the UK and other countries at the moment. But we've got to be very, very careful, because what they're talking about doing, and this is where I do have very grave concerns, what they're talking about doing is putting in place a new British Bill of Rights. Now, if there is, so we've already got a Bill of Rights from 1689, although it's not really that comprehensive. I mean, you look at the American Bill of Rights and it takes what we had in Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights of 1689 and expands it. I mean, the American Bill of Rights, half of it is really, doesn't relate to us in the UK much at all, but half of it is very good. I mean, the first amendment is fantastic because it puts freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom to protest, freedom of religious beliefs are all in one article, and that is an absolute right. Unlike in the European Convention of Human Rights, where your right to free speech is a qualified right. In the American Bill of Rights, it's an absolute right. Then you've got the right to bear arms. Okay, that's we don't have that in the UK, so it's not really a debate in the UK. But protecting people, the Fourth Amendment, against unreasonable search and seizure by state agents, seizure of properties. The next three amendments are about trial by jury, and then the Eighth Amendment summarises the rights that we have from the Bill of Rights of 1689. So no excessive bail and fines or cruel and unusual punishments. So those are the key points from the English Bill of Rights, which are put into the American Bill of Rights, but it gives you more rights as well. So if we had something like that, that would be fantastic. Even parts of the European Convention of Human Rights are good. But my concern with the British Bill of Rights, which people have rightly highlighted, is that it will start to implement some kind of communitarianism. Rather than having individual rights, it's the green paper for it is talking about the rights of the common good. So the rights that we'd have by what's being proposed, there will be some individual rights, yeah, but there will also be mixed in with this communal rights. And with that, then the government will have the right to take away your medical autonomy and inject you with a vaccine, for example, for the common good. Now, that goes completely against everything we have in our heritage and tradition, and you know the right thing that we have with common law and our fundamental freedoms. No government has the right to compel you or coerce you to take a specific medical treatment or injection of something. But what they're going to try to do with a new Bill of Rights is to bring in this kind of communitarianism and say, well, to protect everybody, you need to do this. Now, that's not human rights. That's not fundamental freedoms. That's acting against your human rights and fundamental freedoms. So my concern here is that we do the right thing of coming out of the European Convention of Human Rights, which we need to do for our national sovereignty, but then the government will try to implement a very twisted, inverted, new concept of human rights, which is nothing to do with individual rights, but it's to do with communitarianism or communism, basically, that they will, in the name of human rights, they're going to take your human rights away and saying for the common good, the government can send you to remove you from society or force you to get a digital identity or force you to get an injection of something. Now, that is the concern, and I know that's a genuine concern people in the freedom movement have, and I totally agree. So my personal view here is we don't need a new British Bill of Rights, because we have all the rights that we have from common law and, as I said, from Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights of 1689 and other things. And you can't trust anyone who's an MP at the moment in any of these parties we've got, fake Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, because they're all SNP, as they're all totally beholden to the globalist New World Order system. So they will use anything they can and twist it in order to bring in the beast system of digital identity, social credit, central bank digital currency with programmable units of currency that they can then say that program to say, oh, you can't spend your money when you want it, where you want it, how you want it, which is also a fundamental freedom. Would they put that in the Bill of Rights, that everybody has the right to use cash and to spend their money when they want, how they want? No, because they want to actually bring in a system where you don't have that freedom and you don't have that human right. And that's certainly something, a power that should be curtailed. The government should have no power to determine what medicines you take or don't take, how you spend your money, and what you spend your money on, or where you go, or who you speak to. So that is the big concern with what they're doing and how they're doing it. So on the back of doing something good, they will do something worse. And that's the big concern. So we have to be very, very vigilant, because we need to get this right. And the people in Parliament have got a very, very poor track record of doing anything right. They do almost everything wrong, and they twist everything. So that's my nuanced view on the current situation on human rights. So I hope that makes sense. I've talked for a long time again. I'm sorry about that. But if you have any comments, I know a lot of you leave comments, and I do read them all. I can't respond to them all, unfortunately, because I get thousands of comments every day on all the different platforms I'm on. So I thank you everyone for giving me comments. But do let me know what you think about what I've said here, because I know some of you might agree with everything, some of you might agree with some things, some of you might say, oh, I don't agree with that, or I don't agree with anything you've said. It'd be really valuable to me to know, you know, what you think, if you follow this channel. So please do leave comments there below as well. And you know, if you do want someone to get this right, because you know I've said, you know, so I'll put it out there what I think. You know, the only thing I can do is be honest about things and tell things the way I see it. And there's no point doing anything else. And you know, even if people might say, look, I don't agree with you, best thing to do is to say what you think, so that everyone knows what you think and knows what you intend to do. Because if I ever do get into a position of power in Parliament, I hope so, in the near future, we need to start putting the country right. But I'd like, you know, you to agree with me that this is the right thing to do. But if you don't, that's fine. We have free speech, which is our human right. So please do leave me some comments below and tell me what you think. That would be great. Okay, have a good day, everybody. God bless you all.